Hi, everybody. Good to see you all, some of you again after last night, and hello out there. So thanks and welcome. We're absolutely thrilled to be welcoming RS Deeren, Raymond, to just generally as a human we care about, but also as an author whose debut short story collection, Enough to Lose, is out and terrific and well worth celebrating and purchasing. I'm Mike Wendt, I'm the program and director here at Woodland Pattern. I would like to begin with a land acknowledgement and say that we at Woodland Pattern acknowledge that here in Milwaukee, we live and work on traditional Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee homelands along the southwest shores of Michigami, part of North America's largest system of freshwater lakes, where the Milwaukee, Menominee, and Kinnickinnic rivers meet, and the people of Wisconsin's sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present. We further acknowledge the grave evil colonialism introduced to these lands through genocide as well as slavery, but also via racist and xenophobic beliefs, laws, and practices that continue to inflict harm upon Black, Brown, and Indigenous lives. We honor those who have lived and do live now at these intersections of identity and experience and are committed to the active dismantling of white supremacy. Many thanks again to you all for joining us. Raymond, it's really great to have you back in Milwaukee. I just have a couple announcements, and then, some introductory things. Try to say nice things about Raymond and the book. And then, not try, as though it's an effort. I'm sorry. They'll just flow. So of course we have copies of Enough to Lose in the bookstore, so please visit us there after if you have not already. And then a couple of events wrapping up the year for us that I want to mention. One is the 15th of December. Makes sense if there are events wrapping up the year that they would be in December. So the 15th of December, it's the QWERTY Quarterly Issue 3 release party. QWERTY Quarterly, the official publication of QWERTY Fest Milwaukee, which is a festival celebrating the QWERTY keyboard invented right here in Wisconsin. So that's going to be quite a lot of fun. Contributors to Issue 3, including poets, writers, and others will be in attendance, along with organizers of the fest, T. Krulos and Molly Snyder. And then our Formation series for new and improvised music. There's a concert on the 21st featuring Trench and the Tontine Ensemble, which has become something of a holiday tradition. So not holiday music. I mean, it could be. I don't know. Any music can be holiday music, I guess, if you believe hard enough. So we'll say that it's holiday music. I don't know if they would appreciate that or not, but that's all the announcements. So first I need to say, just Raymond, that we're thrilled to welcome you back to Milwaukee. It needs to be said that Raymond was integral to the life of Woodland Pattern during his time in Milwaukee, both just part of the everyday rhythm of Woodland Pattern, but also taking on some major projects, including our annual inventory, helping out with that, cleaning out the Bat Cave, the storeroom in the basement we affectionately refer to as the Bat Cave, which was no small task. Yeah. Covering for me when I was on paternity leave with my youngest kid, and surprised I didn't get replaced, but here I am. So anyway, so that's all to ask. Raymond, can you stick around for a couple of weeks? We've got some projects. Okay, yeah. But no, truly, I mean, of course, it's wonderful to celebrate the book, absolutely, but it's just really nice to have you back. Specifically as an human in the world that we care about. So speaking of the book, so I'm going to offer this introduction. I'll keep it brief and then turn things over to Raymond. So I've been myself lost in Enough to Lose, which is a book that lends itself to this kind of immersion as RS Deeren delineates a world, a real world for us to inhabit, a place populated by fully realized characters, alive in their idiosyncrasies of voice and manner, with some characters recurring across stories, further lending to the intimacy, by turns warm and stifling, of life in rural America. A life where elements of the natural world itself also become characters, often exacerbating the undercurrent of economic and bodily precarity, the ever-present threat of a flooded river, a freshly killed deer roadkill that becomes an intermediary for a brief but charged encounter, and the land itself, who it belongs to, who can lay claim, and in what measure. All of this, and so much more than I can say in the context of this intro, is treated with such care, compassion, and tenderness in this devastating and beautiful book, which I urge you to read. As Karen Tucker says it, quote, "A barn burner of love and longing, enough to lose delivers gut-punch stories over and over, each one studded with fierce insights about class and family and rural living, and rendered in tender, electric prose." It's an incredible pleasure to welcome RS Deeren.
Thank you. I am if I cry, I'm going to cry because people cry. When I got news that the book had sold, I'm like, I'm going to go to Woodland Pattern, and this is going to be where I read, no questions asked. These walls mean so much to me, the books in it, the people in it. This place is just brilliant. I've said I've now moved across the country twice now with Jessica, and I've told people this is my favorite place in the city, and it's 100% true. I want to thank Liam and Valerie for being here today too. This book exists in large part because of their guidance. I workshopped some stories with them early on. And everybody here to support. It's just really brilliant. I'm excited. If you have a book and want to follow along, I'm going to read the first story, The Mirror, because I think that's a nice introduction. I guess that's why it's the first story of the book. And I'm going to skip around a little bit, but I'll let you know when I skip around. And then I figured if this will take me about 20 minutes to read. I won't read too fast. And then we can have a Q&A if you'd like, or just a hangout, and I would love to sign your books if you got a copy. So I'll keep a timer so I don't go over. There's nobody reading after me. I don't know. All right, so I'm going to read The Mirror. The river crested 10 feet too late, so there'd be no saving the house. FEMA had designated the land between the river and the house Zone A with no base flood elevations determined, which meant that in the grand plan of putting houses where people wanted them, but not necessarily where nature would tolerate them, it was legal from the county's perspective to build. "Go ahead," the surveyor said. "At home on the banks of a lazy river," said the realtor. "You've always wanted your own place to fish," Jackie Chubbert said to her husband, Chubbs. It was all she needed to say to convince him to buy. From an insurance perspective, no BFE meant no flood coverage, which meant no claim, which meant that the new carpeting the Chubberts had just laid, the pots and pans from the wedding registry, and even her mother's ottoman, the same one Jackie used to sit on as a kid when she'd listen to the Tigers game on the radio while her mother drew a diamond on the napkin to track each hit, were all nothing more than memories floating downriver waiting to be collected by scavengers and scrapped. That is, after the dam water receded. Earlier that week, the weatherman had said to expect some light rain across Michigan's Thumb region, with more severe storms drifting to the south and west over Detroit, Flint, and Saginaw. That was just dandy, Jackie thought. She could finish painting the walls in the second bedroom, then start on the molding. Chubbs could do the same in the main bedroom. With 20 acres of land, mostly ash and cedar woods, they had plenty of work to do outside, and with a 30-year mortgage, more than plenty of time to get it done. 30 years, Jackie thought as she finished outlining the door frame in eggshell white paint. They'd owned this corner of paradise outright by the summer of 2016. She set the brush on the rim of the can and wiped sweat from her forehead. That year seemed unreal, too far away to fathom. She heard her husband across the hall grunting while he painted. "How's it going in there?" she called. "Good," he replied. We need a higher step ladder. You good in there? Jackie looked over the outlining she'd done. The room was the perfect size for a child's bedroom. The neutral color on the wall would be easily coated over with whatever color a teenager might want. Then, once she and Chubbs were empty nesters, it could become a hobby room. She'd always loved pressing flowers. Maybe by then they would be painting these same walls a different color, anxiously awaiting a visit from their daughter or son. Jackie placed a hand on her belly. When to tell her husband? The last time, they'd gotten too excited, told too many friends and family, which made it not taking even harder to handle. This time, it would be best to be sure before telling anyone, including Chubbs. Doing fine, she said. I wish it would stop raining, though. She poured some paint into the roller pan and began the first coat. That weatherman sure didn't know what he was talking about. For days, it had rained in sheets. In the middle of the first night, the two had decided to head to town to buy burlap sacks to fill with earth. They would barricade the doors, just in case, and continue fixing the interior of the house while the rain passed over. But news had come over the radio on the second day saying that Caro had lost power and all local businesses had boarded themselves up. Fine, Jackie thought. We're off the village grid and still have power. The bathroom tiles need regrouting, and I can paint the kitchen. She knew Chubbs was a firm believer that as long as they had a roof over their heads, they would turn out fine. He could start his new job next week, and eventually they would have life down to a cozy routine, living fence to fence in the city, a distant memory. Let it rain, she decided. We're safe in here. They'd eaten eggs and toast for dinner on the second and third nights, listening to the weather forecast. The storm had caught moisture up from the Gulf, and now Canada was breathing down on it, the weatherman's words. Fed by the winds, it now stretched from Michigan's Sunrise side over Lake Michigan and up to the Lake Superior coast of Wisconsin. The storm that had been predicted to run its course in a single day had lingered, then stalled. On the fourth morning, Jackie heard the water first, splashing down from the ceiling in the master bedroom. She walked down the hall, past the bathroom where Chubbs was hanging the antique mirror his grandmother had given him. At the door to the bedroom, the carpet squished under her feet. Chubbs, she yelled. Chubbs, rain's coming in. Across the room, a pool of water had grown on the floor under the window. Jackie knew she wouldn't be able to do anything. A finger in a dike is just a front row seat to something horrible. 15 yards outside the window, planks of wood, deck chairs, and what looked like the top half of a tool shed floated downriver. Chubbs was in the middle of balancing the mirror. Jackie ran to the kitchen and grabbed a new soup pot. She threw it under the drip, creating a water-on-metal ping, ping, ping. Chubbs. Yeah, Jack, I hear you. 1 second. That afternoon, the seals on most of the plumbing gave way, and Chubbs spent the ensuing hours under the bathroom and kitchen sinks with a flashlight between his teeth and water dripping on his face. Jackie paced through the rooms of the house with the pots and pans, zeroing in on the drops coming through the roof that the realtor's inspector had marked as satisfactory on his official report. The pots filled every half hour, and she began a cycle of emptying them into the bathtub. The tar yellow water pooled, draining slower than it should have. She'd spent her entire life on city water and never knew a house with a septic field instead of sewage lines. So when the rain began to fall, it felt like nature's attack on the homestead started there. We weren't supposed to get this much rain, were we? Jackie crouched next to Chubbs and passed him half a peanut butter sandwich. That doesn't matter, he said. It's falling anyway. In the dark, a convoy of 3 pickup trucks pulled up the mud driveway, their fog beams bleeding orange against the wall of rain. Jackie tapped her husband's heel with her toe and leaned over the kitchen sink. Someone's here, she said. Through the drain, she watched Chubbs wrap duct tape around a drain pipe's end. Plumbing was not his strong suit. The flashlight was wedged under his chin, and he was trying to peel a length of tape with his teeth. The driver of the first truck got out and ran to the porch, and he pounded and pounded on the door. Hey, he said, open up! Had it not been for the weather, Jackie wouldn't have let him in so quickly. She remembered her mother telling her not to talk to strangers when she was little, could hear her say to never let men she barely knew into her home. But for God's sake, the man had to all but swim the few yards to the front door, and the roof had more leaks than she had pans. The tub was half filled with grime, and Chubbs was still screwing with the kitchen sink. The voice of her mother was just going to have to shut it. "What the heck are you doing out in this?" she said. She pulled a towel from the drawer. The man ran it over his head and face. "Look, you don't know me. The name's Alton Sutby. Al. Listen. This here storm ain't going anywhere soon. The Maine boys are out front. We're going to get you folks somewhere dry." "Who is it, Jackie?" Chubb said to the pipe drain. "A neighbor," Jackie said. "Look, Mr. Sutby, Al." "Fine," Jackie said. "Al, what are you talking about?" "Jesus Christ," Chubb said. A new leak in the roof poured through the drain. Jackie grabbed the towel from Al and tossed it to Chubbs, who stuffed it into the bottom of the sink. Jackie fought the fuzzy dizziness around her temples. The drips plopped and rang in the pans, and the rain pelted the new double-pane windows. When she and Chubbs had toured the property for the first time, the summer was still in the middle of a drought. She had walked down to the riverbank. This far up, the Cass River was hardly more than a stream, their realtor had said. A narrow line of water ran along a cracked riverbed, smelling of fish and warm, dead leaves. Jackie loved that smell. But she loved it in its own world, 60 yards away from her kitchen. Now, as she hovered over her husband with a stranger soaking the floor inside her front door, she felt the smell rotting the little hairs inside her nostrils. "You don't have time for this," Al said. "The river is rising. Grab what you can, things that can survive a soaking. The boys got room in their beds." Chubbs climbed out from under the sink, holding a busted trap assembly in his hand. "You got any kids?" Al asked. "Excuse me?" Jackie felt herself go flush. It all felt like a violation. This rain, this stranger in her home, and now in her thoughts. "This is an evacuation, folks," Al said. "Kids first." "No kids," Chubbs answered. "All right," Al said. "Let's go." Through the window, Jackie saw one of the trucks flashing its high beams. A horn blared. This is what she'd call a sign. From God or some other interested party, it didn't matter to her. She believed Chubbs recognized good advice when he heard it, and she did her damnedest to get him to listen as often as possible. In the mad dash between the house and the trucks, they managed armfuls of clothing, canned food, and linens from the hallway closet. There hadn't been time for Al to introduce the two other men with him. All Jackie knew was what Al had told her. They were brothers, neighbors, ready to help. For a moment, when she was shoving sweaters into the back of one of their trucks, she thought maybe this was a con. Maybe these men were vultures taking advantage of the storm, pretending to be good Samaritans, but ready to rob her and Chubbs blind. What the team was removing from the house, though, wasn't anything worth stealing. And no matter how badly she wanted to think this storm was a bad dream, it was real, and it was getting worse. The rain fell steady, and Al promised a hot shower at his place, some 10 miles up the road, safely perched at the top of a river valley. Tired, drenched, and shaking from adrenaline, the Romaine brothers stuffed themselves into the trucks and waited for the Chubberts and Al to make a final pass inside. In the bathroom, Chubbs wrangled with the mirror he'd hung. "Whoa, buddy," Al said. "Ain't got room for that." "We'll make room," Chubbs said. "I love this mirror." "It's a mirror," Al said. "I got one in my bathroom you can use." That was his grandmother's, Jackie said. She had a laundry basket full of groceries, cornflakes, red beans, and canned peas. She raised him. Al looked at her. She looked at her husband, and Chubbs looked at his reflection in the mirror. "It's all I've got left of her," Chubbs said. "This is our home, and she's part of it." He promised her he'd moved her out of the city, Jackie said. "Shit," Al looked around. "What about the bedroom? We can wrap it up on the bed." Chubbs shook his head. "Hey, man, it's the best we can do. It's got a better chance with some kind of roof over its head than sitting out in the storm." 3 of them stared out from the mirror, wet and dirty. A line of water spilled onto the glass from a crack in the ceiling. "If we have to," Chubbs said. Outside, they waded toward the trucks. The water had drowned the tomato garden, and only the red tip of a garden gnome's hat pointed out from the water. As the trucks began up the driveway, a wave of water pushed into their grills. "Whoa, baby," Al said. He held onto the wheel, struggling and failing to keep it straight. The water didn't stop. He stuck his head out the window for a better view. There was no road to see, just more river. Christ, he said, we're washed in. There's the barn, Jackie said from the back seat. At the back of the property, our cars parked by it. The pole barn was 50 yards behind the house and a good 200 from where the river should have been. It was nothing more than steel siding, a roof, and a dirt floor. The convoy inched their way up to it, parking as far away from the river as possible. When they finally collapsed in the barn, everyone was too exhausted for anything more than pleasantries. They exchanged names, then ate canned vegetables in silence. The Romaines were twins, Robert and Randall. Before Jackie had finished eating, both were already stretched out on the floor, falling asleep. Al wasn't too far behind them. Jackie and Chubbs couldn't close their eyes. That night, while Al and the brothers slept, Jackie and Chubbs sat in the door, listening to the storm. The barn had an old cast-iron wood stove in the back corner that the Romaines had tried to light, but when they opened it, ashy water flowed out. She pulled his head close to her chest, and he curled his arm around her waist. He squeezed her, and she thought, tell him now. What's that noise? Chubbs asked. Through the gravelly pour of rain on the barn roof and the moaning of tree roots pressed against the force of the river, a loud sucking came from the house, like a small child trying to pull their boot from the mud, slow, waterlogged. It sounded expensive, she said. Too expensive, he added. Leaning outside the door, they couldn't see anything but the outline of the house. Water lapped at the bottom of the vinyl siding. A few times, a loud crack came from one of the main supports. The next morning, Jackie tried to start a fire. The roof had held through the night, but all the rain had continued to flood the chimney. The smell of wet soot hung over the smell of wet man. There wasn't much in the barn left behind by the original owner, only stacks of wood and newspapers. The newest of these papers, which Chubbs used as a pillow, was already 20 years old. Jackie sidestepped the men sleeping on swaths of old newsprint. Peeking through the crack in the door, everything was brighter. To the south, beyond the tree line, she swore to God, was a patch of blue sky. Everything still smelled like fish, but now there was some wind, a sign, she hoped, that the storm was moving out over Lake Huron and would become Canada's problem. The other men snored and groaned. Al slept propped against the edge of an empty workbench. Jackie noticed for the first time how old he looked. He had glasses with small round lenses. It was the kind of thing she would have noticed when she wasn't evacuating herself and all she could carry from a house with a Swiss cheese roof. The night before, Al had been so forward, so ready to act just to get her and her husband away from the river. Action, she figured, overruled age in a way that nothing else could. Fear came close. Love, too. Now, with his arms folded over his chest, he seemed to her to have never known any other pose. She tiptoed back to her husband. Chubbs, she said. Chubbs's eyeballs darted beneath his eyelids. She knelt on a paper, circa 1954, and shook her husband awake. I wasn't sleeping, he said. I'm up. He closed his eyes again. Honey, it's not raining that bad. I think it's over. Chubbs opened his eyes and cleared his throat. God damn it, he said. What a night. What a mess. He leaned forward on his knees and looked down at the Detroit Free Press sports page. 2 girls cheering at a Tiger Stadium on opening day. What's the damage? I don't know, Jackie said. She put her arms around him. The house is still there. As the morning progressed, the men awoke. Al came to the door where the Chubberts stood watching the rain. At least you can see a few yards, he said. He yawned, stretched, and patted them on the shoulders. The Romaines had busied themselves with replacing their wet newspaper with dry, bickering over where to place the fresh paper. Boys, Al said, say hi to the new neighbors. Morning. Pleasure. The Chubberts eked out smiles. Chubbs quickly turned his attention back outside and toward the house. What now? He said. We should eat something, Jackie said. She opened a box of cereal and began to pour out handfuls to the men. Outside, the road was still an extension of the river. Maybe we could get some more food in the house, Chubbard said. You think that's the best idea? Al asked. It's better than half a cup of cereal and canned veggies. We left the weather radio in there, too. He stuck his arm outside to feel the rain. It's got to be clearing up. "Let's wait a while longer," Jackie said. She plopped down next to the twins and poured some cornflakes into their palm. "I hate cornflakes," Randall said. "You'd hate starving even more," Robert said. I'm going to skip forward a little bit because then they just kind of learn a little bit about the world. And I'm going to skip ahead to page, for those of you following along at home. Just the next page. Bottom of page 10. Is that where I need to go? Yes. "I'm sure I can make it to the house," Chubbs said. He leaned on the door jamb, kicking at the mud. Behind him, the group read old news and compared the price of corn and soybeans across the decades. "Chubbs, don't," Jackie said. She looped her arm around his. She had spent a day fighting herself, hushing the voice inside her head that told her to tell Chubbs she was pregnant. It would give him something other than the house to focus on, but it was still early, earlier than their first try. "Jack, think of it," Chubbs said. "All the photos we left, the rest of the food, Grandma's mirror. Did we even grab extra socks?" They had not, in fact, grabbed extra socks, or underwear for that matter. The only things they'd managed to get in the scuffle were jeans and a couple of sweatshirts, all of which hung around the barn trying their hardest to dry. Chubbs hugged her. She felt his steady heartbeat, and a part of her agreed with him, but there was still way more inside of her that feared the water. "Look at this," Randall said. "I found a write-up from when the Ark Church burned down." He pushed himself up and walked over to his brother, who dozed on the floor. "Robert, you remember this, don't you?" He kicked his brother's foot. "I'm trying to sleep," he said. "You slept last night. Come on, you'll like this little blast from the past." He crouched down and dangled the yellow paper above his brother's face. "Our parents took us to Sunday school there when it went up in until it went up in flames," Randall said. "Thank God for that fire," Robert said. "That place was boring." "I didn't think so," Randall said. "I mean, some of that stuff was pretty cool, like people turning into salt." He pulled the paper away from his brother and reread. "Or what about Noah?" Robert said. Al rolled his eyes. "They rebuilt that place as soon as it burned," he said. "The quickest thing to go up in this county are churches." "And taxes," both brothers said in unison. The three men laughed and flipped through more papers. "A building can disappear in a blink," Chubbs said. He kept his gaze out across the water. "If there isn't someone around to do something about it, everything could be lost." Jackie felt his breath deepen. She rubbed his back and kissed his cheek. "Let's eat something," Jackie said. "What's on the menu, Al?" "Looks like 3 cans of apple pie filling and 2 cans of fried onion topping," he said. "That's it?" Jackie said. We'll have to ration," Al continued. "Hey, Romaines, that church ever teach you about fasting?" Jackie stumbled to the basket, thinking that maybe Al was the type of guy who cracked jokes in times like these, a coping mechanism of some sort, the kind of thing that if you didn't know a person, they'd be quick to think the guy was something of an ass, because really, who lies about what kind of food is left when people are trapped in a pole barn and there was a flood when there hadn't been one there mere days earlier? But Al wasn't lying. There was only pie filling and onions. Hunger boiled in her chest and her throat, coating her tongue with bile. So, this was it, she thought. No intimate moment to themselves when she could tell her husband the news. Just a dirt floor, 3 waterlogged strangers, and the rest of their food as good as gone. She cupped her hands over her face and ran her fingers along her eyebrows and temples down to her jaw. This could be a good story to tell her child, years from now, with the men becoming more waterlogged and the river turning into rapids as the story evolved through its retelling. Chubbs could play the hero, wading through the current and returning with food. Jackie turned to the door, to her husband, but he wasn't there. At the barn door, Jackie yelled for her husband. He was already halfway to the house. The wind kicked up, and Jackie heard tree branches crashing in the woods. Jackie began after him, but stopped when her feet sank into the engorged earth, sucking and popping as she pulled them free. Al and the brothers were already at her side. "Get back here, you idiot!" Jackie hollered. Chubbs didn't turn around. The water had risen in the night and was still falling with no place to go but places it wasn't welcomed, like on the back porch. Something was wedged against the back door. Now, calf deep, Chubbs froze, and in that split second, the current knocked him sideways. Jackie gasped as she saw Chubbs go under, but he regained his footing. That moment hit Jackie like a decade. "Come back," Jackie screamed, stepping toward him, only to have 3 sets of hands hold her back. "What's that across the door?" Randall said. "Is that a body?" Robert said. Jackie nearly vomited at the idea of a body, someone upriver who had fallen into the drink and now was gone, just like that. Al squinted. "I think it's a deer." Chubbs climbed over the thing and kicked it away from the door. The brown mass churned in the current. It was a dead deer, its head lolling as it drifted in front of Jackie. When she turned back to the door, it was open, and Chubbs was out of sight. Another moment of panic washed over her as she thought Chubbs had fallen again. "Henry Delaney Chubberts!" she yelled. Water rushed into their house, carrying with it hunks of wood, lawn debris, and mud. She saw Chubbs then in the kitchen window. He was running in and out of view, disappearing into the shadows deeper inside the house. "What's he doing?" Robert said. Jackie tried pulling free from the men, but their grips were firm and her feet had sunk into the earth again. Chubbs opened the window and punched out the screen. Cans flew from it, one after the other, plopping into the water, some making it beyond where the river had crested. He leaned out over the window and yelled something, but Jackie couldn't make it out what it was. He pointed to the cans. "Food," Al said. He ran back to the barn to retrieve the laundry basket. He's cleaning out what's left. He's cleaning out what we couldn't get before," Randall said. The twins high-stepped their way towards the cans, tossing the closer ones back toward the barn where Al collected them. Chubbs threw more cans. The twins locked arms like a short human chain so they could reach the ones that had landed in the water. Jackie's chest heaved as she watched the cans shoot out from the dark window. This was insane. If she had only told Chubbs that they were pregnant again, no way he would have risked his life for a dozen cans of Jolly Green Giant. "Mother of God," Al said. He dropped the laundry basket and grabbed Jackie's wrist. The water was rising faster now, and a loud noise roared from upriver. It sounded like an army of snowplows charging at them. "Get back to the barn," Al yelled as a wall of water pushed into the side of the house and into the kitchen window. Robert and Randall hugged a few cans against their chest as they made it to Jackie's side. "The dam must have failed," one of them said. The men said more things, but Jackie tuned them out as she watched the river flow into the window where Chubbs had just been. And then he was back in the doorway, holding his grandmother's mirror. "You idiot!" Jackie yelled, one hand waving in the downpour, the other resting on her midsection. "We need you!" The water racked the house from every side. Once, when they were young, not yet engaged, they were cruising the state roads outside the Detroit city limits. Chubbs had pulled into the shoulder of a busy stretch. He told Jackie he'd seen something on the other shoulder and that he'd be right back. She told him not to go. The 4 lanes were thick with rush hour exhaust. He smiled at her and, like that, was in the street, dodging semis and Chevys and Buicks. One end to the other and then back again while Jackie leaned against the driver's side door, the radio singing in the background. He plopped back in the driver's seat and handed her something. It was a flower, Queen Anne's lace. A weed, really. A stupid stunt, but a bouquet of a gesture. Chubbs tried hiking the mirror onto his shoulder, but couldn't seem to get a firm grip. The house shuddered. Jackie called to him, wanting to wring his neck for grabbing the most impractical thing, wanting him to simply make it back, wanting some idea to come to her that would help her help him do just that, hating herself for not having told him she was pregnant. He stepped out onto the porch at the exact wrong moment. When the wind kicked the water up, the clapping hands grabbing the siding and ripping the porch from the house. Chubbs fell backwards into the doorway, dropping the mirror into the river. He rose to his knees, braced against the jam, arms under the water, swishing around, feeling for the mirror that was probably already 20 feet away. Another wave crashed into him, almost sending him away. The expanse between the barn and the house was now more river than land. Finally, Chubbs met Jackie's eyes. If there had been more time, maybe Jackie would have understood Chubbs's need to take a chance like this. Maybe, too, he would have realized why she had stopped drinking, why she had spent so much time working on the second bedroom, why she had told him eggshell white was a good burst coat. No telling who might want to paint it something else. "Chubbs!" she cried. "I'm pregnant!" She didn't know if she had said it loud enough or if the truth had been lost to the wind and rain. In a horribly perfect motion, the water lifted the house off its supports and spun it in the current. Jackie stepped forward, losing one of her shoes in the river. She couldn't see Chubbs until the house spun around. He was bracing himself in the doorway, but there wasn't anything to him. No tears, no fear, nothing left for her to salvage for the years to come during those nights when she wouldn't be able to sleep, for the mornings when she looked at herself in the bathroom mirror and saw that doorway and Chubbs' deadly acceptance staring back at her. She threw herself toward the image of her husband. The river lapped up her ankles, up her calves, up her waist until she became half river, half woman. "Jackie!" Al shouted. "Jackie, come back!" She continued after the house. The wind stirred up whitecaps on the surface of the river, and branches crashed into the waves. The twins huddled behind Al and spoke in mangled, meaningless words as the house spun into the main flow of the river, leveling trees as it went. "Human chain," Al called, "now!" Robert and Randall held hands, Robert holding onto the tailgate of his truck as Randall inched out into the water. Al shimmied down the short human rope and circled one arm around Jackie's waist. "Got you," he said. He pulled her close to him, tucked under his chin. The house hit a wall of jammed logs and curled over it like a horse going over a fence. Jackie couldn't look away. The sound of it, Jesus Christ, the sound of her home as it splintered on the other side of the logs, like chicken bones in a garbage disposal. The men pulled themselves back to the barn onto some idea of dry land. Al held Jackie. "He's gone," she said. "He's gone." There was nothing left the next morning. The men tried to get Jackie to eat, but they lay on a bed of old, forgotten news. Jackie didn't know about this county, its history. She didn't know anything about FEMA-designated floodplains. She didn't know that she had lost her husband to the worst natural disaster to break the thumb since the forest fires nearly a century earlier. She didn't know these men who stood watching the soup-brown foam bubbles at the edge of the casts and the whirlpool that spun in the hollow of her home's foundation. They saw her, she knew, as a stranger, homeless, friendless, hopeless too. And even as they issued words of hollow comfort, she didn't know these men, and they would never really know her at all. 1 week after the rain began, it stopped. Al hoisted Jackie off the dirt floor and promised her a room in his house for as long as she needed, until she could recover, until she could start a new life. "At least you're alive," he told her as they pulled into his driveway, as if that even began to explain what she was supposed to do next. Thank you. Jackie and Baby show up, but you have to read the rest of the book. We can do questions. We can just sit and hang out. You want me to stay talking into the mic for the folks at home? We can take other questions online. Is there a Zoom chat room? Oh, cool. Yeah, I'll take questions. Or just hang out. And also, hi Jenny. Hi, Steph. That's so nice. Yeah, John, what's up?
Yeah, so what were you doing when you heard the news that the book got published?
What was I doing?
What was that experience like?
It was just like an email. I think I was dissertating at the time, and I think I was like just focused on finishing that, and that was getting wildly out of hand. I had moved to Portland. Did we learn about it in Portland? Yeah, we learned about it in Portland. And my agent had just said, "Here's some good news." And then I had to like scroll because I was on my phone. And I'm like, what's the good news? Is it like a nice rejection? Because I'd been getting a lot of good rejections. And then, Marie Sweetman at Wayne State University Press was like, yeah, this is right up our alley. And I was like, okay, cool. I hope this helps me find a job. Yeah. So I might have been cooking dinner or something like that. Yep.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You said that Jackie and her child appeared later.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't read it yet.
Yeah.
Obviously, but I want to know, are the stories all linked? Is it one?
Yep, they're all linked. They're all linked. So this story takes place in 1986. That flood really happened, and starts in 1986 and then ends in the lead up to the 2020 elections. And it just follows. There's a lot of folks who make good, and there's a lot of folks who don't make good. Chubbs obviously doesn't have a chance to make anything. They're all. Some of the characters are minor, and you're like, oh, that's what happened to that person. That's really nice. Or, oh, that's what happened to that person. Makes sense. He deserved it. Yeah. So they're all connected, and the people who deserve it get it. Yeah. So there's that. Valerie.
Yeah. Oh, I love the story so much. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, if I might interrupt, my apologies, but yes, I'll hook up this microphone so that people at home on Crowdcast can hear the questions as well. So.
I love the suspense in the story, and I just was so impressed by how you just keep dialing it up, and the waters are rising. It's just, I was filled with anxiety. and I was wondering, like, did you know all along that Chubbs would die, or were you like unsure? You know what I mean? Like, did you know that you were building toward this particular ending, or just that you were going to put them through this ordeal and it might turn out in a variety of ways?
I did not know that he was going to die. And when I was writing this, like, I had this idea that I was like, oh yeah, it'll be 7 days, like 7 days of Genesis, and it'll be this, because there's church talk in there, and then I'm like, and then it'll end, and it'll be like a slightly hopeful note, and these people can start their lives together. And then Jackie wasn't pregnant at the time, and the Sutby name Al, that character, that he was like my focus, because I was like, yeah, it'll be, this guy will pop up a bunch of times and be a hero or something like that. And then I was thinking about, so like that flood really happened, and my parents had gotten caught in that flood in 1986, and things turned out fine. They were pregnant with my sister at the time, and I thought, what if it hadn't turned out fine? So I kind of went with that, and I didn't want to kill a pregnant lady, so it had to be Chubbs. Yeah. So I remember when I first killed him, I was like, I've never killed a character before. He was the first character I'd ever killed. Yeah. So, soft place in my heart. Yep. Morgan
And I'll just say also for those at home that you can type questions in the chat if you would like.
Yeah, and I'll respond I'll read them out loud so everyone can hear them. Yeah. Hi, Morgan.
Hi, George R. Martin, killing off your characters here.
Yeah, hardly.
I was just wondering why a mirror?
I don't know. A mirror. I wanted to call this story The River, and a bunch of user testers were just like, no, it's got to be called The Mirror. I just wanted it to be something that, like, as we have these trinkets or these things that have so much sentimental value to us, and they don't mean nothing in the real world, in the grand scheme of things. I just had a conversation with Jessica, mostly to myself. My mom used to have a bunch of strawberry stuff, and hello, Mom, if you're still listening, if you're still there, if you're up. My mom had a bunch of strawberry things, and she had this strawberry spoon rest for the stove, and it's like this white glass thing, and I was washing it, and I told Jessica, if this slips out of my hand one day, or your hand, and it breaks, I'm going to feel bad, because it's like sentimental, but it's also just a strawberry. It's not a big deal, but it is a big deal. So it matters to him, and it's all he has left. The parts that I do skip, that I didn't read, they spend days in this barn, and you get to learn more about the reasons why they come up here, the reasons why he wanted to take her out of the city, and how she was kind of trapped, and so there's more of that relationship. But I just wanted some kind of talisman, and it started off as like maybe spoons, I think, in an early draft, but then I had like this idea of him grabbing this really dumb thing while he's trying to feed people, and he's like, but also we have to feed our souls or something. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as you're reading this, and I have read the book, and this is not a spoiler, but there are a lot of men who do
Dumb things.
Well, thank you, dumb things.
Surprise, surprise.
And I'm just kind of struck hearing you read this again, like how just practical the women are. Like there's one story where like a woman is trying to fix her freezer, and this guy's like trying to talk to her about this agreement that he's made with other men in the community, and she's like, whatever, dude. Like, I got other things to worry about. Like this, like she's trying to be, protect this fetus and like stay alive, and her husband's worried about this mirror. And then there's some other stories. So that just kind of, that's not a question. It's just a comment as you were reading this for me, reading it mentally as you were reading it out loud. I was just like, yeah, there's a lot of dumb men and
Yes.
the women who love them, and I don't know what that says about us Midwesterners,
I think
but
part of me is a dumb man raised by really smart women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but anyway. Nice job. It made me
Thank
think
you.
a lot. I mean, sorry. I didn't mean
I had a
to
lot of
derail,
strong
but-
women role models growing up, so
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that was part of it.
I
There's
mean,
a-
and Al and the brothers are they're with it. They're not all men, but Chubbs is definitely one of those men. So I'm so mad at him. Like, why? It's a mirror, sir. Like, anyway. Next question.
Thanks for reading it. I'm staying at Morgan's place, by the way, and she talked to me for like 30 minutes about the book, and I'm like very Midwestern and also Catholic, so I was like, I'm really sorry that I'm here right now taking up space, and I feel bad for you talking to me about my book. But I'm like, no, thank you so much. That was very kind. Hey, hello.
Hey, I really enjoyed your reading.
Thank you.
And I was just wondering about the genesis of the Link short story collection. Was this something you knew you were writing from the very beginning, or did you kind of discover it along the way?
I loved the idea of a Link story, and a story collection, I had originally, there's only one story in here that exists from the first collection that I had, and I had this idea of these kids. So in Michigan, we got Devil's Night, which is the night before Halloween, where there's just a ton of arson, and it's a thing. And I wanted to start with that, and then those kids grow up in the last story, and those stories don't exist no more. And I just kind of started writing more about jobs I had, odd jobs that I had throughout college and after college and during the Great Recession, stories from jobs that my family and friends had had. And having moved away, because all of these take place in my hometown, having moved away, I lived here, I lived in Chicago and Portland. I just kind of wanted to write about the people who couldn't leave that space, and the people who didn't want to leave. And the links became less overt. This guy grows up and becomes this man. And it was more like, so there's a character named Jamaica, and she shows up in like 3 stories, but she's only a name in a couple. And those are the people that I go home every year for Thanksgiving, and I just recognize the people who have always been there. So it's connected more that way. Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions from anyone here or online? Okay, yeah.
Sorry. I just want to go back to the mirror again.
Yeah.
And why I think it's so great that it's the title and what the image does for me when I heard you reading it. I just think about like talking about a talisman of something that someone leaves behind, and yet a mirror is the thing that you see yourself in. And so I love that is how he's going to remember his grandmother, is by this mirror. But then the fact that the mirror takes him away, and that when she looks in a mirror, that's always going to be there. So I think the title's perfect. I really think that it makes the story in a certain kind of way, because it pulls out this undercurrent. Sorry about that. Yeah. But it does. It really illuminates the story by drawing attention back to that thing that also has taken him too. You know, holding on to something can also be destructive sometimes. So
Yeah.
that's great.
There's a scene that I skipped over that shows, like, it takes him back in time, and there's a moment where she's teaching him how to shave. So Chubbs don't have a dad growing up, and neither will his child. And she's, like, trying to teach him how to shave. So there's that memory that gets, but I skipped over that because I wanted to get to the action. Thank you. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it like that. That's brilliant. I'm going to steal it. What's that?
As someone who cares very much for objects, hold on to objects to help remind me of stories and my past, and I don't think it was dumb. I'll put an alternative view here of someone wanting to hold on to something to kind of build a future with, like, holding on to the past and kind of bringing the past in with him as he builds this life with. So I think he was trying.
It's usually what men do.
And he might have, his emotions and his nostalgia or his emotions or whatever got the best of him.
He also doesn't see the future that she knows about, so he's in the past, I suppose. Valerie, did you have a?
I have one last one.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't have to be last. I didn't mean to shut people down.
Yeah, no, definitely.
I was just wondering, well, two things. You can just pick one or the other, but what's your favorite story in the collection? Like, not necessarily the one that you think is the best or that other people have liked the most, but just your own personal favorite and why? Or also, was there something in the collection that you had to fight for that other people didn't see and that you hung on to?
I have three answers to the two questions. The first answer is, so there's a story in here called About the Lies, and it is, I think, the third to last, or no, it's right in the middle. It's smack down. No, I don't know where it is. Where is it? There it is. It starts on page 63. So now I'm going to read the whole thing. About the Lies, I had read a bunch of short story collections, and there always seemed to be, like, one story in particular that was like, that story is about storytelling. Like, it's so obviously, like, that person's either, like, telling a campfire story or it's a retelling of like a fairy tale or whatever. So this one, it's first person. It's got that character I mentioned, Jamaica, and she gets to tell you all about her life, and it's kind of quieter. It's about her one night stand that she just, like, she liked it. She had a great time, and she's like, do I kick him out? Or I kind of want to let him sleep. So she lets him sleep, and she goes get some cigarettes, and she's, like, learning about him. And I really, I like the story because she's like, she had all these opportunities to leave. And growing up in Cairo, I was pretty much told, like, you're not going to stay here. Like, this isn't the place for you. You have to go to college. You have to leave. And there was always this idea of, like, oh, you're a small town kid who made good. And I always, like, thought of that as, like, well, what about the people who want to stay or the people who can't leave? And she had all these opportunities, and then she lost them. And she's kind of really made good for herself there. She's a bartender. She just really commands a space. There's a moment where there's men that are kind of snickering, and the men just shut up. And I won't give anything away, but the guy does something dumb. The one night stand does something dumb, and I just really like it because it's like the story before a story starts, and then I don't tell the other story. So there's that one. And then things that I had to fight for and lost, there was a ghost story in here, and it didn't make it past my agent, and he said, this one's so far out of it, which is strange because if you all know me, you know that I chop wood a lot, and this was a wood chopping story, but it also had, it had ghosts and everything. And my agent's like, nah, it doesn't fit the tone of this, get rid of it. And I was like, I just want to have a book. Okay. And then also, this is really small. And it's the title of Her Guts and All. Everybody wanted me to get rid of this. So the title is Her, Guts and All, for those of you at home. So it's not Her Guts and All, it's Her Guts and All. And everybody was like, get rid of the comma. just get rid of the comma. One person said it's way too poetic. And I'm like, there's no such thing. There's no such thing. And also, you got to have a little bit of poetry in fiction. So, and then the story Her, Guts and All has a strong mother character. It has a doe. It's a deer hunting story. And it was the first thing I wrote after the 2016 election. So rich, loudmouth, and poor families going head to head. So I kept that comma. So just a tiny thing, yeah. Yeah, thank you. I was right. Anything online or anything else from anybody else? Hello, and thank you for folks for being online. I really appreciate it. Well, thank you so much, everybody. This is just so humbling. It's just so beautiful. Thank you so much.